Hi there. Welcome to the West End Cultural Center's video music lesson series. My name is Brian James. I've been playing guitar and recording and writing and teaching music for over 20 years now, and I'm really excited that I get to be a part of this and share my love of music and songs and the guitar with you. So thanks for checking it out. Here's some things that I hope that you take away from this lesson. We're going to learn how a guitar, the different components of a guitar and how a guitar makes sound and how to make some adjustments on the guitar. And I have a few different guitars here because there's like some small differences. We are going to learn some exercises to strengthen your hand so that your hand can do what we're going to ask it to do. There's a little thing sort of known as the guitar hump. A hump is like something sort of just like a little bit of a mountain you got to climb right at the beginning, where you're gonna be trying to put your fingers on the strings, and it's not gonna feel right because it's something you're really not used to. And most people, unless they've played a musical instrument before, they kind of use these fingers a lot, but then they don't use their last two fingers very much, and then when you ask them to do something with all of their fingers, then it can be discouraging. And also, when you're touching the guitar, you're kind of touching something that, like skinny and metal, and that can be uncomfortable, right? Like if the tips of your fingers can be tender, and then so when you start touching the guitar, you're going to be like, oh, I don't like this. It's kind of tender on my fingers. So that's just like a little bit of a hump right at the beginning, where if you kind of do some of these exercises like 3 or 4 days in a row, that's going to leave right away. After 3 or 4 days, you're not going to like dislike touching the guitar so much. You're going to like touching the guitar, and that's when it gets really fun. So please learn these exercises and do them just a little bit every day, and it's going to really pay off and really increase your enjoyment of music and playing this instrument. We're going to talk a little bit about theory, and theory is just a way of having language to talk about music and creativity. So a lot of people hear about theory and they think it's kind of scary and it's like math, and they want to play music because it's fun, and theory doesn't sound very fun. But just think of theory as like we're just going to learn a little bit of language to be able to talk about music, and that way when you meet other musicians, you can all talk about it together using the same language, and that's really fun when you kind of find a crew and you'll have like a special language you can talk to create together. It's really fun. We're gonna talk about rhythm. You can't learn about music without rhythm, and you can't play music with other people without rhythm. And rhythm, again, can sound intimidating to people, but rhythm is just like the space between the notes. So there's two things we gotta learn. We gotta learn how to make a note on our instrument. And then how to make the note that we want on the instrument. That's one part of learning. And then the other part of learning is kind of learning the space that the note exists in. There's space between the notes, and the space between the notes is almost kind of more important than the notes themselves. So we have to develop a balance between being able to make a sound and then knowing when to make the sound, and then we'll be playing music. It's gonna happen really quick. And then we're gonna teach you some songs that maybe you might know, maybe you might not, but learning songs is really important to be able to learn how a song is put together, how to learn how to break up a song into segments that are learnable, and then at the end you can put all the segments together and then you know the whole song, instead of just starting at the beginning and being like, oh, I have to play 5 minutes of music in a row. Learning how to break up that song into like little bites that you can know, and then you put them all together, and all of a sudden you're playing a whole song. And that's really important too. Even if you want to write your own music. Maybe you think, oh, I don't want to learn other people's songs, I just want to write my own music. Well, I want to give you some tools to also write your own music if that's something you want. But learning other people's songs is really important too, just so you can see the building blocks of how songs go together. So let's get right into it. The anatomy of the guitar. This is a classical guitar or a nylon string guitar. The biggest difference is it has nylon strings instead of metal strings. So the plus is that you're gonna like touching it a little bit more than you like touching metal strings. If you go right to metal strings, you're gonna touch it and you're gonna be like, ooh, it's It's a little ginger. But this is a little bit easier on your fingers, so often I'll recommend people learn on a nylon string guitar. The other thing that's different about a nylon string guitar is that the neck is slightly wider than other kinds of guitars. So that means the strings have more space between them. And that may mean you have to stretch your fingers a little bit more, which some people don't like. But if you have to kind of exaggerate how you're stretching your fingers, then that gives you really good technique. So I personally think nylon string guitars are great to learn on. So starting at the head, this is the head. And then 6 strings obviously are going to meet 6, they're going to all attach to a different roller that you can use the tuning pegs to tune up and down to make sure that your guitar strings are all tuned to the right note. And then we have the nut, right where the head meets the neck, and the nut has these notches here to make sure that all the strings are the right space apart and that it's keeping the strings off the fretboard. We don't want the strings touching the fretboard or the frets. We want them to just ring freely. And then we're into the neck, and the front of the neck is the fretboard. And the fretboard is divided up by these metal frets. And you can see the frets, when we put our fingers on the different frets, that's how we make different notes. After the frets, the neck meets the body, and then we have this big body, the sound hole, that allows some of the sound coming from inside the guitar to come out, and it allows us to hear all of the wood resonating, even the wood inside. And then the strings attach here to the bridge. And on a nylon string guitar, often you just tie the strings to the bridge like that, and that's how the strings attach at the bridge. If we had a different guitar, this is sort of a more standard kind of steel string guitar, and it's mostly the same, but you can see the strings attached to tuning pegs here that kind of like stick out instead of like go across like on the nylon string guitar, and they are all attached to tuning pegs, which you can adjust. Then you got your nut, then you got your fretboard with the frets, and these are steel strings. And then where the strings meet the bridge, that's a little bit different. Steel strings kind of have like a little ball on the end. And then you would put the ball into those little holes in the bridge, and then these little kind of pegs, they're like stoppers. So once you put the end of the string in the hole, then you just put this little peg stopper on top of it, and that holds the string in. And so that is how that guitar works. And then finally, the last main type of guitar we're going to find is an electric guitar. So same deal. This kind of guitar, like this Fender kind of guitar, has all the tuning pegs sort of like on one side in a row. So that's a little bit different, but it's still the same. Six pegs and 6 tuners to tune the 6 strings. And then some guitars have like a little guide to make sure that the strings are following the right path all the way up to the tuner. Then we've got the nut, same as the other guitar. We've got our fretboard with the frets. And then here, often some guitars where the neck meets the body, you'll have a cutaway, right? And that's so that your hand can reach even higher on the fretboard without the body of the guitar getting away. And then here are some pickups. If you have an electric guitar, it's going to have an assortment of pickups. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. So this would be called the neck pickup because it's close to the neck, right? So there's the pickup and there's the neck. So that's the neck pickup. This would be called the bridge pickup because it's close to the bridge. So this guitar, this particular electric guitar, I've done some modifications on it. That's the fun thing about guitars, especially electric guitars, is you can modify them how you like them. So this has a floating bridge, and this has this is called a Bigsby tremolo arm. So that's kind of a fancy thing that I've got on this guitar. And it kind of, you can just add some extra kind of like spacey sounds and textures. So that's just kind of an extra. Not all guitars have these, but I put one on mine because I think they're super fun. And then you're going to have some controls on your electric guitar. This is a pickup selector. So if I have the pickup selector pointing this way, it's going to be set to this pickup. And if I have it in the middle, then it's going to be sort of a combination of both pickups. And if I have it set that way, then it's going to be this pickup. And then there's two dials on this guitar. This dial is for the volume. And then this dial is for the tone. So the tone is going to like kind of control how bright your guitar is or how twangy it is, right? So that's kind of it with no tone. And then as I turn my tone up, you can hear the kind of like the high end, the bite sort of starts popping out. And you may have a guitar with 4 knobs. And what that means is you're going to have like a different volume knob for each pickup and a different tone knob for each pickup. So if you have an electric guitar, you can actually really get a whole bunch of fun sounds by fooling around with the knobs and like the pickups and just the different levels. And that's it can be really fun to like just try out different sounds with the knobs. So that's all the parts of the guitar, except yeah, like all guitars sort of have a different way where the strings are going to meet the body here at the bridge. I mean, obviously all the strings attached to the tuning pegs, right? But then where the strings meet the body is always going to be different. So with this one, they're all hooked onto the bottom, oopsies, the bottom of my bridge there. But before I put that bridge on, I would have put them up through the holes in my guitar there. So I would have put the skinny end and just through, and then the ball would catch. And then, so that's how my strings used to attach, right? So there's all kinds of different ways strings attach to your guitar, especially electric guitars. There's lots of different versions of them. So how does a guitar produce notes? How do we make different notes on the guitar, right? So all of these strings are tuned to a note. We're going to get to that. Each of these strings is tuned E, A, D, G, B, E. So we're going to learn to memorize the names of the strings. It's going to be really important to know the names of the strings, because then when we say we need you to put your finger on the D string, you're going to have to know which one's the D string, right? So every string starts off already tuned to a note. And then as we start putting our fingers on the fretboard, what we're actually doing is when I put my finger on the first fret right there, what I'm doing is I'm pressing the string onto the metal fret. So this is actually right where the string is touching the metal now. That's where the note's happening, even though I'm putting my finger kind of in front of it. So that's important because you're going to find out that the best sounding notes are when you put your finger really quite close to the fret in front of it, because that's where you're going to like get the best contact between the string and the metal fret. If you put your finger right on top of the metal fret, you're going to kind of get a bit of a fart sound, and it's not great. If you put your finger too far away, like way back, it's kind of hard. You're not getting enough pressure for the string to touch the fret, so you're going to get a less good note. So just imagine A lot of people don't figure that out. They just think they're putting their finger on the wood and that's making the note. But you're actually touching the metal fret. That's important. So the closer you are to the fret without touching it, that's how you get the best notes. So that's your guitar. Hopefully you've got a guitar. There's some other tools that we're going to be using. One of them is a tuner. Everyone who plays guitar should be able to tune their guitar. And it's going to be way better because tuning seems like it's a big hassle, but then if you're playing guitar and it's not in tune, you're not going to be having a very good time. You're just going to be like, oh, this sounds terrible, and it's hard, and I just don't know why. So if you tune your guitar, you're going to hear those strings ringing together in a nice way, right? If your guitar is out of tune, that's just a little bit out of tune, and that's ruining our video right now. Let's get it back in tune. So I think the best kind of tuners, there's different ones. You can get ones with microphones on them. You can download an app for your phone. You can get a pedal tuner, where you would, if you have an electric guitar, you can plug it into the tuner. But these kind of guys that just clip onto your headstock, they're really, really cheap, and they're really, really easy to use. Because all those other kind of guitars, especially if you're using your phone or something with a mic on it, then the other noise around you might not let you tune your guitar properly, or just mics in general are kind of finicky. And then so it's like just something that's easy to use, because here's the thing. You're going to have to tune your guitar all the time. I tune my guitar like between every song. Sometimes I tune it in the middle of a song, because it's just the nature of guitars that they're going to go out of tune. And like you might bend the strings, the temperature might change, you might knock your guitar. Like these things will really go out of tune at the drop of a hat, and it's fine. We're going to get good at like just getting them right back in tune, which is why I recommend one of these, because it's going to make life way easier. If you have a tuner that doesn't work and you're tuning all the time, that's going to get discouraging. So these guys are like 20 bucks. You can get them even cheaper. So make sure you have a tuner. I suggest you get a headstock tuner, which is just going to read the vibrations of your guitar. So it doesn't need a mic or anything. It just picks up the note really well, and it's really easy to use. Another thing that we're going to use is a capo. And a capo is a way of basically taking where your guitar ends and moving it up, right? So if that's my guitar, and all the strings are tuned a certain way, but if I clamp all the strings on the same fret using this capo, then all of a sudden, all my open strings are tuned to different notes now. Everything's just a little bit higher. So now, something that I could play without a capo in a lower key, using the open strings, now when I capo it, I can play the exact same thing, but everything's higher now. And I can still use those open strings. So that's important, because lots of the music that you hear on the radio, especially with guitars, are going to use capos. And so if we want to learn some of those songs and be able to play along with the original recordings, then it's important to have one of these. So capo, we're going to learn to use a guitar pick or plectrum. So I'm sure you've seen one of these before. You should buy a bunch, because they're probably all going to end up in a black hole somewhere. So if you buy a bunch, then you'll probably be able to find one. So tuner, a pick, and a capo, those are all going to be really important. And then just for fun, if you've got something slidey laying around, we might play along with the guitar slide. So a guitar slide is really good for showing you that the notes are actually right above the frets, not where the wood is, right? So when I'm playing with the guitar slide, if I want my note to be in tune, I have to put the slide right over the metal fret. If I put it in the middle, that's not in tune, but if I put it right over the fret, that's in tune. But we'll get to that later. So the names of the strings, how were we going to remember the names of the strings? It's really important, because that's when we're talking about the guitar, we're talking about all the different strings all the time. So we just got to know what they're called. So here's the way I do it. E is for Eddie. A is for 8. D is for dynamite. G is for good. B is for bye. And E is for Eddie again. So there's 2 E strings. So what do we get? We got Eddie, 8, dynamite, good, bye, Eddie. So that's a little story. We have Eddie, what did he do? He ate something. What did he eat? He ate dynamite. What happened? Goodbye, Eddie. He ate too much dynamite. So anything you can do to try and just like memorize these strings. And as we go forward, if you don't know what string I'm talking about, pause the video, like make sure you know what string I'm talking about. Knowing, like putting your fingers on the right string, that's going to be very important. And then if you're confused about what string I'm talking about, that's going to make things harder. So Eddie ate dynamite. Goodbye, Eddie. And that is from low to high. So this is another thing where it can get confusing. Low and high, they can mean different things, right? So when I say low as a musician, I'm talking about like the lowness of the music. Like if I wanted to sing really low, like Barry White, that's low, right? But if I wanted to sing higher, my voice is going higher, right? And then so that is the lowest string, this E string, but it's actually, if you're talking about in height, like from the floor, right? It's actually the highest. It's the furthest from the floor, but it's the lowest note. So that can get confusing. So then I like to talk about skinny strings and thicker strings, right? So the low strings are like the big thick strings, so you can tune them lower. And then the high strings are the skinny strings, because you can tune them higher. And we always want to reinforce, like the more we can kind of imagine low to high on the guitar, the more we're going to be able to kind of create on the guitar, right? So we always want to be imagining that these are the lowest notes on these strings, the thicker strings, and then the low notes also start down here, right? So as I'm moving my finger up the neck, the strings are getting higher. Can you hear them getting higher? Some people don't think about high and low when they're listening to music, but it's a really good thing to do, is see if you can track the music going higher and lower. And then you're able to sort of imitate it, and you're able to come up with your own ideas if you think about music in those terms. So those are the names of the strings. So you probably want to play something on the guitar. So we're going to learn our first warm-up. And I always called it the spider. A lot of people call it the caterpillar, maybe if you're afraid of spiders. But basically, we're talking about something with a lot of legs that are going to represent your fingers. When we're playing the spider, we want to choose 4 frets. And it doesn't matter which 4 frets they are, it just kind of matters that your fingers line up that way. So say I'm starting on the 1st fret here, then my first finger, my index finger, is going to be on the 1st fret of the E string there. And I'll play a note with my pick on my right hand. And then my 2nd finger, my middle finger, is going to go to the 2nd fret. And then my 3rd fret, my ring finger, my 3rd finger, my ring finger, is going to go to the 3rd fret. And then my 4th finger, my pinky finger, is going to go to the 4th fret. So if we put it all together, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what we want to do is go up to the next string, the A string. And we're going to do the same thing. First finger on the 1st fret. So you can see I went from the E string to the next string, and my fingers were all on the same frets. Just because I switched strings doesn't mean like my hand moved position. So the idea, we're going to go up, after we do the A string, we'll go up to the D string, and your fingers are still on the same frets. Even though they're different strings, we're just doing it the same. Up to the G string, 1, 2, 3, 4. Up to the B string. And then finally up to the high E string. So you want to practice that all in a row, and then try and do it 3 times in a row. That's a good practice idea. If you can do something 3 times in a row, then you're going to retain that for tomorrow. And you want to use the very tips of your fingers when you're doing this. So we're doing this for like as a technique thing. So we want to use our very tips of our fingers. I like to tell people to imagine that they have skeleton hands. So imagine that I've got this hand here, and then there's no flesh or skin or muscles or anything, just bones. How would I make a note? I would have to like just go on the very, very tip of my weird skeleton bone finger and press with the very tip of it to make a note, because I don't really have any finger flesh to make a note. So I'd have to just be right on the very tip, and you're going to find a sweet spot. And the more you're doing it right on the tips, you're just going to find that sweet spot where it sounds the best and it's going to feel good. So that's what we're going for with this exercise. This isn't like a song that you want to like, the notes are fairly simple, just going in order, right? So you're not going to go home and be like, oh, look what I learned. It's not really a song. It's just a way of getting all your fingers moving and touching the strings. So if you do that 3 times today, do it 3 times tomorrow. This is going to send you well on your way to your finger being able to do anything we ask it to do. Okay, so now we can start talking about maybe learning a chord. So your first chord is going to be E minor. And to make it E minor, we're going to take our middle finger, our second finger, and put it on the 2nd fret of the A string. So I'm not putting any fingers on the E string. So let's skip to the A string, and I'm putting my second finger, my middle finger, on the 2nd fret of the A string. And then I'm going to put my 3rd finger, my ring finger, right underneath it on the 2nd fret of the D string. So those are the only fingers we need to hold down for this E minor chord, but then we're going to play all the strings. So you can see my right hand. We have this E, the low E string, right? So that makes sense. We're playing like an E string in an E chord, this E minor chord. So you can see I'm playing all 6 strings. I've only got my fingers on 2 of the strings, but it makes a nice chord. And making sure that you're on the tips of your fingers. And you're gonna wanna make sure, like, pick all the strings individually. And it may be when you get to like some of the higher strings, you might hear something like that. What does that mean? That means that one of my fingers is touching the string and preventing it from ringing out. So when you hear that, when you hear something like a string not making a note, you have to figure out what's touching the string so it's not making a note. In this case, it's my ring finger. I wasn't curling it around enough to get it out of the way of the G string there. So, and so this is kind of the work that you have to do on your own. I'm not there with you. You kind of have to like make little adjustments. I can tell you where to put your fingers, but if it's not sounding right, then you kind of have to go through all the strings and figure out which strings aren't making noise, and can you make any adjustments. It's usually just like a little micrometer, just tiny little adjustments that you'll have to figure out on your own until you have a nice full sounding chord where all the strings are ringing out. So I think that we're gonna leave it there for the first lesson. So I would encourage you to play the spider 3 times in a row going up today, and do that every day for a week, and practice your E minor chord, and then come back and check out the next lesson, and we're going to build on that, what we did. So I hope you learned a lot, and we'll see you next time. It's going to get funner.